the equations of the circle from the other day, from yesterday, were all in standard form. But what the equation is not given in standard form, so something like this, an egg. I like to think it's standard form, all spoiled out, and simplified. Well, we can put an equation in standard form by using complete the square, which you talked about in Algebra 1. Okay? And again, they are the same exact steps every single time, just different numbers. Again, this first one might seem a little overwhelming, but the last one is going to be a piece of cake. Right? It's the same steps. So what we're going to do is we're going to write this in standard form, find the center, the radius, and graph it. So 1, 2, 3 is exactly what we did yesterday. This first part, writing it in standard form, is a little new. So what is the standard form of a circle? What we talked about yesterday. You only have a parenthesis. X, good, minus h, squared, plus, good, good, equal to r squared, good. And then h and k are just representing your x and y value of your center. Essentially, they're just like placeholders for those numbers. Okay. So we want to take this and make it look like this. And we just have numbers instead of h and k. Your first step when doing this, you have to make sure all the x's are grouped together and all the y's are grouped together. First step. If they're not already grouped, sometimes they are. So in this case, x squared is always going to go first. So I'm going to write x squared. What other number has an x with it? 10. What kind of 10 is it? Negative 10. So make sure the sign follows the number. So negative 10x goes next. Are there any other numbers that have an x? No. So after you group all your x's together, you're going to put plus a box or a blank, whatever you prefer. Blanks are a little easier to work with. Okay. Then you do the same thing with the y. So plus the y squared goes first. What other number has a y? That's going to go next. And it's a positive 8, so we put plus 8. Are there any other numbers that have a y with it? Nope. So when that happens, you put plus a blank. Once you do that, the number that doesn't have a variable, so you notice how 16 does not have a variable? If it's not already there, you have to move it over to the other side. So how would we move 16 over to the other side? Subtract it. So we subtract 16, subtract 16. So this is going to end up equaling negative 16. So if the number is on here, you just have to move it over and change the sign. Right? Another step you have to do. So we grouped our x's, we grouped our y's, we put our blanks. That number's over on the other side. We have to balance this out. So you notice how we have 2 blanks on this side? You have to have 2 blanks on this side. So you have to put plus a blank and plus a blank. You have to balance it out. Think what you do to one side, you have to do the other. So we added 2 blanks on the left, so we have to add 2 blanks on the right. Your next step, after you organize this, you're going to take the middle term of each group. I like to think you're going to take the number paired with just the x, and then the number paired with just the y, so that middle number. Okay? You're then going to divide that middle number by 2, and it's super important. You have to carry the sign. So that 10's negative, so it has to be negative on the inside of that parentheses. So you divide that number by 2 and square it. You don't actually square it. It just kind of hangs out there. What is negative 10 divided by 2? negative 5. That's what is going to go in this blank right here. Just leave it as negative 5 squared. Don't actually square it. Square just kind of hangs out. Then you do the same thing with that middle y value. Our middle y value is 8. So you're going to go ahead and just divide it by 2 and square it. Don't actually square it. What's 8 divided by 2? We just write it as 4 squared. Okay. Again, the signs follow. So this 10 was negative, so that's 5 is going to be negative. This 8 was positive, so that's 4 is going to be positive. That's important. Okay. You also have to remember, you put a negative 5 squared in this blank, so a negative 5 squared is going to go in this blank. You put a 4 squared in this one, so a 4 squared is going to go in the other one, and then you have to balance it out. Your very next step, we're going to what we like to call factor. You're not actually going to factor though. You're going to write 2 parentheses. How many x squareds do we have here? I'm sorry, how many x's do we have? This x squared, we have 2. So you're going to break up those x's and each parenthesis is going to get an x. Then you go to that back number. How many negative 5s do we have? Negative 5 squared. 2. So you're going to break that up and each parenthesis gets a 5. Repeat that same process with the y. So how many y's do we have? 2. So each parenthesis gets a y. Go to the back number. How many 4's do we have? 2. So each one gets a 4. That's the same thing every time. You're going to get a number squared here. It's going to be the same thing every time, just a different number. And then your very, almost last step, your next part is to plug that into your calculator exactly how it's written. Okay? So in your graphing calculator,
Everybody's calculator, try this out so you know how to use it. If you borrow ours, get one.
You're going to plug negative 16. Negative 16 plus parentheses, super important with the parentheses, especially with negatives, negative 5 squared plus, what was it, 4 squared? Plus 4 squared. Exactly how it's written in your calculator. Go ahead and practice plugging it in. So you maybe already plugged it in, have your answer. If you're having troubles with your calculator, please ask for help.
Raise your hand, I'll come and have an assist.
So as you're plugging this in, what value do we end up getting? What do we get? 25. Anyone not get 25? You're not getting 25. Please make sure you're raising your hand so we can help you fix it. So that equals 25. One more step. Okay. How many x minus 5 do we have? 2. When that happens, we have 2 of the same thing and you're multiplying, you can rewrite it once and square it. So we have 2x minus 5, we can condense it and make it x minus 5 squared. Well, same thing with the y. We have 2y plus 4, so how could we rewrite that? Y plus 4 squared. And then it's going to equal, nothing happens on the other side, it still equals 25. And there we go. We have our equation of our circle. Okay. Literally the same exact steps every single time. Take them to group your x's and your y's. Write your blanks. Take the middle number. divided by 2 squared. Divided by 2 squared. Fill in your blanks. Rewrite this step, connect. A lot of students, once you get the hang of it, go from here to here. It's the same thing every single time, it's just different numbers. So now that we have our equation, we're going to go ahead and graph it. So in order to graph it, we need to know our center, and we need to know our radius. From yesterday, what is our center? What's the x value? It's negative, what happens to it though? Turns positive, so it's a positive. What's the y value of our center? It's positive, so what's going to happen to it? Turns to negative 4. There's our center. How do we find our radius? Square root that back number. What's the square root of 25? Okay. So just like what we did yesterday with graphing, you go to 5, negative 4. Plot your center, and you just count your radius in all 4 directions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4.
You guys trace your circles? Beautiful circle, by the way. Nice job. One of the best I've seen. All right. Hopefully you get a hang of it. You're seeing patterns. All right, let's keep rolling. It's a good time going here. Well, I'll tell you this. B is actually a step easier than the one you just did. Why? Because back here, what was the first step you did? What was the first thing I need to do with this equation? Involve that 6t. What did I do with that 6t? I had to move it over there because I need the variables on one side grouped together, and I need that number without a variable on the other side. Well, and look at B. That number is already on the other side. Are my variables matched up though? Are the x's with the x's, y's with the y's? Are they side by side one another? No, they're not. So I will have to do that. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to get my x's together. So the first one's x squared. What's my other x? Where's the other x at? What is that x? A 4. What kind of 4? Positive. Take the sign with it. So plus 4x. Well, I know I'm going to have to add a blank with it, add the box to it. Well, let's do the next one. Let's do the y's down. I know I have a y squared. We're going to add that y squared. What's my y to go with that? Negative 6. Thank you for saying the negative there. Negative 6y. I will also add that blank. This is going to equal, well, it's already over there, equals 10. But to keep my equation balanced, I have to add those 2 blanks, those boxes, those spaces, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to add the first one, and I'm going to add the second one. Now let's just figure out what goes in there. Well, look at the first one, the one that's in black over here. I want to look at that middle term. Think of 3 terms, x squared, the 4x, and that blank. The middle term being 4x. What do I have to do to that 4? Divide by 2, cut in half. I'm going to right below there. What is half of 4? 2. And a positive 2 as well. Don't need to put a sign there. And I'm going to go ahead and square that. Well, whatever it is what's there, I'm going to put in that box. This blank. So 2 squared. You guys know what that is, but I'm just going to leave it as 2 squared because I don't need to fix it. I'm going to type in my calculator anyways. Well, if I put a 2 squared over here on this side of the equation, it has to go on the other one to keep everything balanced. Well, let's do the one in red now. What is the middle term? Middle term is, what is it? What's the middle term of the y's? What kind of 6? Negative 6. So I'm going to have to cut this negative 6 in half, and I get negative 3. That negative is very important, so make sure you take the sign with it. Well, I'm going to square it up here too. Negative 3 squared. Also, on the other side of the equation, negative 3 squared. All right, I got everything filled out I need to. Let's start combining. When you get better, we can do the shortcut. We're not there yet. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to break it into 2 sets of parentheses. because I know I have an x squared term and that 2 is squared. So I'm going to break it down like so. I know that I have an x squared. What? So it breaks down to 2 x's. What's going to go behind each of those x's? What is it? 2. Whatever's in that parenthesis goes behind. Take the sign as well. So 2x, 2x. Let's do the same thing with the y's. I don't have 2 sets of parentheses here. I know it's a y in front because it was a y squared. What's going to go behind those y's? Negative 3. Whatever's in that parenthesis is going to go there, guys. Minus the square. Minus 3, minus 3 equals. And now all you do is just take all that stuff on the right side, enter it in your calculadora, and you'll get your answer. So make sure you are tabulating this. And Emmett, you get this number up. He said 23. Huh. Hey, microphone. You can see that 23? Ridiculous. It's 23. I thought he was wrong, and you guys thought you were wrong too, because 23 is not a perfect square. It happens sometimes. You know, it's always r squared. It's still not the standard form I want, because I have to do something with these two, the x's and the y's. So the last thing is, since I have 2 of those parentheses, it's really saying I have 2 of them. Instead of writing all that out, let's do a little shorthand and say it's going to be x plus 2 squared. That means there's just 2 of them. The y's, the same exact thing. I had 2 sets of parentheses. Let's combine them to 1, square it, and we still know the right side is 23 because we did 10 plus 2 squared plus negative 3 squared. There's my standard equation. Done. That's it. But it's super easy now because we can find the radius and we can find the center. What's going to be my x value of the center? I like the negative 2. I heard some people say 2's. Take the opposite, remember. Goes opposite coming out of the formula. What about my y value? Positive 3. Great, fantastic, got the center. Here's where it may get a little fuzzy for you, because of what some of you are thinking. It's 23 is not a perfect square. You're going to tell me you have to square root this, right? 23 is not going to be nice and neat. It happens. Just give me the approximate decimal. So I am going to do the square root of 23. And what is the square root of 23? Rounded, of course. Caitlin? Approximately. Well, let's not round that much up, because approximately 5 would be, let's do 4.8. I like that. Because if it was 5, it would be 25. So it's a little confusing there. So let's say about 4.8, approximately. And let's graph. I can easily graph the negative 2, 3. Negative 2, 3 is right hither. Maybe. I like that. I'm erasing that dot. Dot is not a fan of me. Now, someone's going to say, how do I graph 4.8? You ever wonder that? Well, here's how you do it. What I do is, I'm going to count 5. Just go back a little bit. So I'm going to do that for every single direction. I'm going to count 5 and just go back a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Back a little bit. That's good. It's not exact science. It's kind of hard with my board, too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Back in a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Back in there a little bit. There we go. There's my beautiful circle. Let's see if I can do better with it now to make it my circle freehand. It's not bad. It's not bad. Especially quadrant 1 looks pretty fantastic. And you're done. Yes, we realize it looks like a lot of work up there, but it's the same pattern everything you do. Questions? Questions? All right, go 180 with it. Bless you.
On the back, if you look at the next example, do you notice how all your x's are grouped together? Are all your y's grouped together? And is that number already moved over for you? Yeah, when this happens and everything's already in order for you, you just rewrite everything but just write it with your blanks. So we're going to write this one as x squared plus 8x plus your blank. And then we have y squared minus 2y plus your blank. And then it's going to equal 8 blank plus your blank. So what happens, just rewrite it, but make sure your blanks are there. So now, what's our next step? What do we have to do with each middle term? Good, divide by 2 and square. But don't ask for square. Just leave it there. So our middle term with our x's is what? 8. I'm going to divide it by 2. And square. It's a positive 8, so it's going to stay positive. What is 8 divided by 2? 4. So we just leave it as 4 squared. Remember what goes in this first blank has to go in this first blank as well. Balance it out. What's our middle term with the y's? 2. So divide that by 2. And square it. Good. Make sure you follow that sign. So it's negative. It's going to stay negative. What's negative 2 divided by 2? 4. And square. Balance it out. Once you get to this step, we're going to write our parentheses. Okay, once you get good at it, you can kind of skip this step. How are we going to fill in our parentheses with the x's? How many x, in the beginning, how many x's do we have? Here. We have, each one gets an x. How many 4s do we have? 2. So each one gets a positive 4. Repeat the same process with the y's. We have, radius in there. We have 2 y's. We have 2 y's at the beginning, so each one gets a y. We have 2 negative 1s, so each one gets a negative 1. And then you're going to plug all this stuff in your calculator. Don't forget that step. 8 plus 4 squared plus negative 1 squared. What does that give us when we plug that in our calculator? Okay. Very last step, we're not quite done yet. We have to condense. How are we going to condense x plus 4 and x plus 4? We're going to rewrite it as good, x plus 4 squared. And then how are we going to condense our y? Squared. And it's still going to equal 25. That doesn't change. So now we have the equation of our circle. This guy right there. We have to find the center, the radius, and graph it just like what we did yesterday. What is our center? Good. Sign changes, so negative 4, positive 1. What's our radius? Good. You square root that back number. Square root of 25 is 5. So graph your center. And then count your radius in all 4 directions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Some of you guys walking around, you're moving on your own, doing a great job. Let's try another one. And this one, I'm going to show you the shortcut. Try to make it a little bit easier because you're starting to recognize patterns now. That's great. So let's look at number D up here. Get some information, blah, blah. Hey, look at B. Are the variables aligned? Are they put together? Are the x's with the x's, y's with the y's? Yeah. Is the number that doesn't have a variable on the other side of the equation? Yep. So we go right now and just add those blanks, if we will. So I'm going to say x squared minus 6x plus that blank. Do the y's now, plus y squared minus 20y plus a blank. is going to be equal to my other side. This happens to be a negative 105. But I can't forget to balance the equation. I'm going to add that blank. And the other one while I'm at it. Now I can go. We're going to look at those middle terms of the x and the y. What's the middle term in the x? Negative 6. I need to cut that middle term in half. And now it becomes a negative 3. I will square it. I will put it in that box right there. Well, if I put it there, I put it on the other side as well. Negative 3 squared. Done with that. Let's do the y's. What's the middle term? Middle term is negative 20. What do I do to that negative 20? Divide it by 2, correct? Half of 20 is, negative 20 is? Negative 10. Signs are very important. Remember those. So negative 10 goes there. And it also goes over here. But they're the same. Again, if you have highlighters, colored pencils, it makes it so much easier when you can visualize where they go and match up to the color, the same color. Can't speak. Now here, I'm going to show you a little shortcut. Because we've been doing before, go back a second, you've been doing this middle step where I say I have the same parenthesis twice. We know what happens. Look at the first one we did, or the second one we did. The parentheses are twice. The first one, the parentheses are twice. Why not just get rid of that step? We know the next step is they're going to be squared. Let's do that. So I can go right to my next step here. Let's look at the x's. Say, all right, x's. Well, I know that it's going to be squared, and I know that it's going to be an x, and whether it's in that parenthesis. What's going to go behind this x in this case? Negative 3. I just look right there and say, well, what's there? That's going to drop down. Do the same thing to the y's. I know that they're squared, there's going to be 2 sets of parentheses, but ultimately we'll square them back together. So I'm going to go right to here. I know it's a y. What number is going to go behind that y? Negative 10. Again, what's in that parentheses is going to drop down. And of course I square it. And this will equal what's over here. This is really the only work you really need to do as far as calculations. You just type that in your calculator. You tell me what you get. Negative 105 plus negative 3 squared plus negative 10. Make sure you're using parentheses, please. And when you do so, you get this huge, gigantic number. It's going to be difficult to factor. And that number is 4. It's 4. Good. Get your answer. Got it. Shortcut, we're just jumping around. We know whatever's in that square is going to be there. Make it squared. Again, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So, let's get the center and the radius out of this information. What is the center? 3, positive 3, and then a positive 10. Awesome. What's the radius going to be? 2. I take that last number, and I know it's r squared, so to get it a square by itself, square root. Square root of 4 is dos. Last thing we do, we graph it. Center, 310. Some of you are saying, wait a second. Okay, I'll wait a second. 310. How tall I was when I was born. 310. It's impossible to be 310 when you're born, isn't it? Why would I even say something like that? Like, not physically possible.
I don't know.
So, there's that. What's the radius? The radius is 2. So we go 2 each direction. 1, 2, there's a dot. 1, 2, there's a dot. 1, 2, there's a dot. And then you're saying, wait a second, this goes off the graph. It does sometimes, because there's only so many we can do within this grid. So sometimes it's off a little bit, but just imagine 2 off. 1, 2, there you go. And now we can create our circle using that. And just a little guy. I'm going to say I'm going to not draw a circle ever again, because that was pretty impressive. That's really impressive. Looks like a computer did it. And there's your circle. Question? Okay, well, that thing. Yes, you are going to have a practice question. I guarantee I know your question already. I know what you're thinking. It involves a Y, I bet. All right. Any questions on this?